Average annual interest rate of 17.7%. Now, how is your small business going to create jobs when it has to borrow at 17.7%?
Are your very facts and figures. South Africa is going along quite nicely. Who was it that derailed it? It was Julius Malema in the youth wing, EFF. It was Jacob Zuma as the presumptive president, MK. Right? So I'm saying they are best out of this conversation.
I was in China and there was this town where Xi was the mayor. They decided to just raise the whole thing. So what I'm trying to say to you is that the unmet needs of our people don't understand how huge they are.
Welcome to the State of the Nation. I'm your host, Mike Sham. As we all know by now, Pace Car Rental are driving the State of the Nation forward. Today we get into the most important topic in South Africa, and that is talking about all things economic. And with me today, I'm very proud to say, is one Mr. Duma Gqubule. Duma, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Thank you so much for the invite. Yeah.
And you are a financial journalist, an analyst, an advisor on economic development and transformation. You were instrumental in the creation of much of the BEE legislation. You write regular columns and you tweet like hell, and you bloody end up with some response, don't you?
No, it's a new thing, yeah.
Well,
just get angry sometimes. Yeah.
You do, and it's great. And I would suggest to anybody, if you haven't followed Duma on social media, definitely that's one X account that you should follow if you have any interest in financial news and even the nexus between politics and economics. Let's get straight into it. A lot of what got a lot of response is that you have not been a fan of our government of national unity. Why?
Okay. Let me start.
Yes.
South Africa is in the worst crisis over the last 30 years. Whichever way you slice the data, our economy has performed dismally. I think it's from 1994 to 2023, GDP per capita was about 20% up. But if you compare, for example, China, 783%, India, about 300%, Poland, 200%, Ethiopia, 300%, Rwanda, 300%. So whichever way you cut and slice the data, this country has done badly since the end of apartheid, And the second thing, we can see it as a story of two halves. From 1994 to 2008, we grew by 3.6% a year. And we weren't that is solid, but not good. In India, they used to call it the Hindu rate of growth that they had for decades. That's what they used to call it. But by South African standards, it was pretty decent. And from 2003 to 2008, our economy grew very fast, on average by about 4.5% a year. And so from 2009, South Africans, please focus, to 2023, we had a growth collapse from 4.5% a year, where we created 3.1 million jobs, and now to 1.2% a year. And so what has happened during that period, during the first period, unemployment went down from 40.6% to 28.7%. So now what's happened now, it's gone up to 41.9%. The number of unemployed people has increased to 6.1 million to 12.1 million people. So and if you look at GDP per capita, an imperfect measure of average living standards, in 2023, it was lower than it was in 2007. So we've had 16 years of declining average living standards. We can't continue like this. And I just don't understand why people keep, I don't understand, people don't understand the gravity of the situation. And I refuse to be sidetracked by all the noise that you see in South Africa around cabinet positions and these elite pacts that we're having we must focus on the issue of jobs. Now, I have actually cut and sliced and diced the jobs data for a long time. And I have to give a plug to an organization called Youth Capital that has helped me work on this. They work on youth unemployment. And I can tell you, Mike, there's three things I can tell you about unemployment, about the drivers of youth unemployment. So if you look at the past 30 years, there's never been jobless growth. So South Africans must just get that out of their head that there's ever been jobless growth. I had to apologize. I met President Mbeki about just before a year and a half ago. And I said, I was one of the people who used to say this. I apologize for having said this, But the point is, when you look at the data, there has never been any jobless growth. That's the first thing. Second thing, there's a relationship between GDP growth and unemployment. It's called the employment multiplier. So when the employment multiplier is 0.9. So when the economy grows by 0.9, by 1 percentage point, employment increases by 0.9%. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that so that's the first driver of unemployment. In fact, that's the most important one. So what are the levers to get this unemployment crisis sorted out? The second one is, the first one is GDP growth. The second one is industrial policy. So you have to change the structure of the economy to increase the labor intensity of GDP growth, the number of people who are, each percentage point, how much jobs you create. Yeah, that's the second one. And then the third one is public employment. I was horrified. All the manifestos, ANC, I had to go and present to the ANC's manifesto team. And I said, it is scandalous, just a few days before the election, I think it was a week or two. And this unemployment, you have to have a target for public employment. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, but all the political parties, they never said anything about public employment. So we have got 3 public employment programs. We've got the presidential employment stimulus. We've got the expanded public works and the community works program. Now, this year, they provided about 1.8 million work opportunities. And I calculate about half of them were full-time equivalent jobs. Now, how can you not say anything in your manifesto about public employment? Because if the government does everything that I say they must do on GDP growth, on industrial policy, there will still be many people who are unemployed. So they must be absorbed in public employment programs. But the budget this year cuts the programs by 10 billion rands over the medium-term expenditure framework period. So the number of beneficiaries will be cut by half to 900,000 work opportunities. And the ANC's target is 2.5 million work opportunities, which is a lame target. And I also saw the lame targets in the manifestos of these parties. For example, the DA, 2 million jobs, Musi Maimane. Now, if you look at the maths that I was taking you through.
And that's over 5 years.
So now, if you project until over 5 years forward and 4 or 5 years, no. My projections are correct. I wrote a column in Business Day where I predicted exactly what the unemployment will be by the time of this election. So my stats are correct. So now, if you project for the next 5 years or the next 10 years, unemployment will increase. So we will create the annual new entrance into the labor force. I forgot to talk about that driver, which is about 2.6% until the pandemic, because the pandemic caused a fundamental dislocation to our labor market. So I just ignore what happened then, like in terms of this driver. So now when I project forward, I project by about 2.3%, which is slightly low. Then, so that means 700,000 people will enter the labor force every year until 2029 and 2035, whatever. So that's the first thing. And then we will create on this GDP 1.2%, just about 200,000 jobs. Yeah. So basically, we will create 500,000 people, new unemployed people every year. And then the DA's 2 million is not enough to even close that gap of the new entrants the 700,000 new, and there'll be 3.5 million new entrants to the labor market. So you are going to create 2 million jobs. There will still be another 1.5 plus the 12.1. So we're going to be at 13.6 by the end of your administration. So all of them they didn't think through this thing. Yeah. For example, the last one, I'll say the EFF. The EFF said they'll create 4 million jobs through a state construction company. I all support that. I have no problem with that. But if you look at the construction industry, it employs 800,000 formal jobs, according to one survey, the Labour Force survey, and then the other survey, the Quarterly Employment Survey, it's about 500,000 jobs. Now, half of government spending sustains half of that industry, so 400,000. So how are you going to create 400,000 jobs through a state mining company, state construction company, when the whole industry sustains about 400,000 full-time, jobs. And then all you're going to do is to take jobs from people who are shift existing jobs. So it's not about creating new jobs. So I'm just saying that all the political parties did not think properly about this jobs crisis. Yeah.
But now, looking at much of what you've said on this, it seems like your advice for getting out of the hole, which we are clearly in the hole, is to dig faster, because we've got a government that's severely constrained in terms of finances, right? You are just about everything I've read that you put out is more state intervention. With what money and what clients are they servicing when they do this?
Okay, before we go there, I don't even know where to start on that one. Okay, so Mike, I don't understand. In South Africa, I'm perceived to be left, and I'm calling for a Keynesian stimulus. If you look at the establishment, that is mainstream in the rest of the world. If you look at the establishment in the US, Biden, the Republicans, the Democrats, the establishment is Keynesian, and they outperform Europe. So now, if you saw the COVID stimulus from the UK, from the US, Trump had a bigger stimulus than Biden's 1.9. So they agree that when the economy is in trouble, you have to put more money into the economy. I don't understand why people don't get it. There's no other way of doing it. Give me an alternative. And I spend a lot of time in my columns explaining why the structural reforms that they're talking about, it is spare change. I add up these structural reforms every couple of months, and I say, how much will they contribute towards the situation we're in? And they are just literally spare change in terms of changing the trajectories, the numbers that I'm talking about here.
Yeah, look.
And then where will the money come from? Okay, so now, first of all, there is no scenario where we have a high public debt to GDP ratio, whether you compare it with the rich countries, the emerging markets. That's number two. That's number one. Number two is that
but we've seen an explosion of public debt to GDP.
Yeah, but every single country, like it's in the playground. If all the kids were naughty, so from COVID, there's no country that didn't have an explosion of public debt since COVID. So what I'm saying is that. So the reason for the rising Keynes 101, the reason for the rising debt ratio is because the economy is not growing. Debt is measured as a percentage of GDP. So let's focus on the growth. The only long-term solution to this debt problem is to grow the economy. And during that earlier period from 2003 to 2008, when we were creating jobs, our debt ratio came down, because the economy was growing. So the two drivers, as the economists say, are R minus G, the growth, the cost of capital and the growth rate. Yeah. So I'm just saying that there is no way that we can now, where will the money come from? I'm not a populist, so I explain where the money will come from. So, now, I don't know where to start. Like I've got a whole things that I talk about.
Ladies and gentlemen, he has brought a book with him. Right?
I forget a lot. Yeah. So now, like, no matter what we can say is that a central bank can finance economic development, number one. During COVID, global stimulus packages were about 17 trillion, and central banks throughout the world financed the big portion of this. I used to do the numbers. It was about 11 trillion that was financed by the central banks. Now, if you look at some of these countries, I have to look at this. Yeah.
No problem.
So if you look at these countries where it happened, like in the US, half of the stimulus was financed by the Fed.
Okay.
In the United Kingdom, 97% of the 300 billion was financed by the Bank of England. In the Euro area, 83% of their stimulus package was financed by the ECB.
Right.
Now, you can go to Japan, you can go everywhere. That's number one.
Yes.
Number two, I say we have to restructure our SA Inc. balance sheet. Now, what I mean by that is the public, I used to advise COSATU, the unions, during their public sector wage talks, and I used to tell them the truth. We've got the Public Investment Corporation, which have got assets of 2.7 trillion, according to the latest, the latest Reserve Bank bulletin. Yeah, I look at the Reserve Bank bulletin figures. And then number two, we've got foreign exchange reserves about 1.2 trillion. And people don't believe it. Cash of 200 billion. Cash of 200 billion. I started pointing out that there's this cash that you're not using, and the Treasury has started reducing the cash.
So let's admit that the country needs the stimulus. And the state is a good place to start. There is one thing that you haven't mentioned at all, and that is the complete trust deficit.
Yes.
Right? Which means that the population, South Africa Inc., doesn't trust the state to do this, because we've only seen theft out of the state.
100%.
So in other words, if we do have Julius Malema's construction company, I mean, he was very good at construction in Limpopo. We know that they'll do a great job, because look at all those bridges that he built. But, if we look at a state-run construction company, I mean, I don't know which is the first bell that rings in your mind, but I know which is the first bell that rings in my mind, and most of the people that are watching us today, is that, we even had the president standing up saying no COVID money would be stolen. And the first thing that happened was the COVID money wasn't just stolen, it was stolen by the health minister. So do you think it's realistic to expect the state to behave like an honest broker or an honest partner in our problem that we have with our finances?
Okay, so we have no option. That's the only way we can get out of it, is through spending. So I've got this friend of mine, Mkhuseli Jack, who he ran for mayor of Gqeberha, and he is quite more conservative than I am. So I was arguing with him, Giti Kusta, okay, let's set up something like the Solidarity Fund during COVID. Let's have 9 solidarity funds in every province. And then you in Gqeberha, you're going to have a solidarity fund for the Eastern Cape. So let's bypass the government temporarily. Let's set up something that is public, private, community participation. So in New Brighton, I'm from my father's side of the family is from the Eastern Cape. So in New Brighton, the people will come across with projects to create jobs, and they'll be assessed based on objective criteria, objective criteria, whether it's jobs, it's empowerment, or whatever. They will assess it, technocratic assessment of these projects. But we have to do something. So I'm saying that we have to, if it means bypassing the government temporarily while they sort out their mess that they've created. And you must remember that during the New Deal in the US, in the 30s, they set up what they called alphabet agencies. There were many of them, like 10s, 20s, many alphabet agencies, which you temporarily set up to. So what I'm saying is that we have to obviously sort out the mess that is in the public sector. Number two, we also have to sort out we have to innovate in terms of the institutions that we're going to use to drive this growth, So so these are some of the, so I've been talking about an institution for example, to create jobs as well. We should merge these 3 public employment programs that I was talking about into create one institution that is gonna, we merge the 3 and create one institution.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just sort of jump in, because I'm hearing a lot of state and a lot of government and a lot of thing. And as a free marketeer, I get a little bit jumpy, because every cent that the government generates is generated off the back of some entrepreneur, somebody with a good idea that pays taxes, right? And I haven't heard you mention taxpayers once. You think that Pretoria will provide and other fallacies? I think that was a comedy back in the 70s,
Provide what?
Well, there was a one of these farce shows where Pretoria shall provide and other fallacies. It's a joke. Every bit of wealth is created by the entrepreneurially minded South Africans.
But how is the entrepreneur going to make money in the economy that doesn't grow? So I was telling Kusta, you've got businesses in the Eastern Cape.
Yes.
How is it in your interest that the Eastern Cape economy has collapsed more than even and the Northwest? How is it in your interest? It has to come from the government.
I've got a ready answer for that.
Yeah.
I think that the state has on purpose collapsed those economies, because who would come third in the road from the bottom would be Limpopo.
Yeah,
right?
no, Limpopo's created the most jobs in those 15 years,
right?
As a percentage of employment.
That's a good economy, eh?
No, I'm not saying it's a good
I'm saying,
I'm just saying that I was doing some analysis of the jobs per province.
If you look at
I was doing analysis of the jobs per province to, this thing that the DA has created the most jobs. So I checked it, and then yes, the DA has created the most jobs, but as a percentage of employment, Limpopo's number one. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm just saying that Limpopo, and it's not enough. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But if you had to rank our provinces in terms
by
of
jobs,
by economic performance. If there was some measure, and I'm not sitting with your files in front of me, but they are, there has become a perverse incentive for the ANC to run those provinces badly. The worse they run, the more they vote for the ANC. Mm-mm. So there is that perverse incentive, so the province that is probably, if we put in a whole lot of measures and we both understand economics, you can get any number you like. But let's just say the Western Cape as number one. That's the province that's least reliant on the state, and therefore the ANC got the smallest number of votes, and then Gauteng and so on and so forth. The point is that there's almost a perverse incentive.
Okay, but where is the growth going to come from?
Well, the growth comes from exactly what you're talking about, because if one looks at the Western Cape, for example, let's use the Western Cape as an example. Why is it growing? Why is it creating employment?
No. The Western Cape, I did a whole column on this. Yeah, so the Western Cape tracks the national average.
Okay.
Yeah, they say so in their own documents. I went to the Western Cape economic, their provincial economic whatever, and what you see in the Western Cape, I don't have the column in front of me, from 2003 to 2008, they created the most jobs. And under the DA, from 2009 to now, they created less jobs. So most of the jobs, so unemployment increased under DA over the past the unemployment rate increased under DA over the past 15 years and declined under ANC for those 3 years, of those 5 years of growth. But the lowest unemployment rate in the country, then I went and looked at the data from the 1996 census. This is something that they inherited from apartheid. They had the lowest in 1996, long before the DA ever existed. Right. And what I'm trying to say is that there were different explanations. I talked to Ibrahim Rasool, and he says it was something that was created because of the color labor preference area and keeping Africans out of the... But what I'm trying to say is that I just think it's a myth to say that the Western Cape has performed well, because by their own admission, they just track the national average. Yeah.
Right. Now I'm going to pull the pin out of the hand grenade. Yeah. Right. Because there's a hand grenade, the pin's coming out. Because I know that if there's one thing that's going to set you off completely, is anything that sounds a little bit like neoliberal policies.
Yes.
Right. In other words, don't free up the markets. Create as much red tape as possible. That seems to be what you favor. Right? More and more barriers to entry, more and more bureaucracy that stops entrepreneurs from opening businesses, more and more forms to fill in. And I see the solution as being the opposite. What's your view?
I agree. We must get rid of all the red tape. But the point is, you can deregulate the economy as much as you like. If there's no demand for the things that companies produce, what's the point?
So you don't back the entrepreneurial spirit in South Africa to find those products that will be bought by somewhere in the 7 billion people on planet Earth.
No, I'm saying that but the economy, the economy is not growing. If you are creating jobs, you're just taking them from me. It's a zero-sum game. So we have to grow the pie for everybody. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So
that's where we run into Transnet issues.
Yes,
international markets. And the fact, the biggest disgrace is that we haven't been able to benefit from our weak currency.
Yes.
Right. And now, what stops that? Well, one could say that as a cruel joke, for the last 20 years, we've had three trade and industry ministers that hated trade and hated industry. Right, you had committed communists in Ibrahim Patel, Rob Davies, Alec Irwin running trade and industry. I mean, what kind of joke is that?
You know, Mike, I look at the numbers, you know, and I've fight with the DTI. What is the budget of the DTI for industrial policy? It's 0.3% of GDP. So whatever he's talking about is just noise that doesn't solve the unemployment crisis. And their latest report about, you know, these master plans that they've set up, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the master plans industries that are DTI, it's about 900,000 jobs that they create. Not they, you know, the industries employ about 900,000 people. We have 16.7 million unemployed people. So I ignore the noise, you know, the political noise around, you know, when Peter Bruce, you know, I used to work with Peter Bruce. When Peter Bruce is going on about about Ibrahim Patel, like I just say, why does it matter? Because Ibrahim Patel did not have the instruments to address this unemployment crisis. Everything he was doing was inadequate to address the crisis. So
but
yes,
he did ban chicken and open-toed shoes.
I don't eat meat, so I didn't have a problem.
Okay,
I'm vegetarian. So, yeah. But anyway, but the thing is, what I'm trying to say, my favorite quote is by Stephanie Carlton. You know, this is going to give you a heart attack.
Yes,
Modern monetary theory. Capitalism runs on sales. In survey after survey, we find that the number one reason businesses are slow to hire and invest in new plant and equipment is a lack of demand for the things they produce. Businesses hire and invest when they're swamped with customers. So how are they supposed to create those jobs without some kind of stimulus?
Okay.
You know, every country in the world, when they're in a recession like we are, the government steps in, then steps out once we're out of the hole. Do you see what I'm saying?
With the door slammed shut behind him in South Africa. But let's go back to something you said earlier. You said that we could look back at the last 30 years, almost in, you know, everybody said there's two halves. We kind of won the first half and lost the second half. What were we doing in that period? In the first 15 years, it was more like, you know, okay, the first 5 years, a little bit, but the real sort of turbocharge was the early 2000s until the tsunami hit us, right? Yeah. What were we doing then that we aren't doing now?
Okay, there's a paper that's written in the UK by a lady called Anne Pettifor. She's and a colleague, I can't remember the name. She's South African. She studied at Wits and she's an activist in the UK around global development issues. And she's my choice of finance minister for South Africa. But anyway, she showed that if you look at the past century in the UK and the US, public debt went down when they started spending more, and public debt went up when they started, you know, tightening the screws. So in South Africa, I looked at it. There are three periods that I look at. So there's 1996 to 2002 when we had the gear period. So what happened during that period, government final consumption spending 2.1% a year. Then there's this thing called a public sector investment. The government talks about a private sector investment strike. I've been talking about a public sector investment strike. So public sector investment declined by 25% from 1998 to 2001 and returned to 1998 levels in 2004. Now, there's something that we didn't talk about, is this central bank of ours. Average annual interest rate of 17.7%. Now, how is your small business going to create jobs when it has to borrow at 17.7%? So there we are. So now, what happened during that period? GDP growth was 2.9%. It's not bad, but not great, you know. And then GDP per capita growth is 0.6. So unemployment increased to 8 million people in Q1 2003 from 4.6 million, 33% in 1996. So what did we do right during that period? People ask me all the time. Government final consumption spending, 5% a year. There was a public sector investment boom. We wasted some of it maybe, but it was 14% a year from 2003 to 2008. So what has happened now? There was another collapse in government final consumption spending to about 1.5% a year, the last 15 years. And public investment has declined by 24% over that period. Now, Mike, I've been doing like consulting on maybe African countries, and the first thing that I look at, I'm opposed to single solutions to multiple overlapping crises. But if you had to put a gun to my head and you say, Duma, what would make the biggest difference? So when I look at any random country in Africa and I want to see, why is Ethiopia growing fast? Why is Tanzania growing fast? Why is Kenya growing fast despite the corruption? You look at the investment rate, and there's nothing, the most idiotic thing this government has ever done is to cut public investment. That is what can make the difference in this country, because I'm not saying that's the only solution, but what logic is there in cutting public investment when it has the multipliers to create, the multiplier for public investment, according to the IMF, is about 2.7 times. So you put $1 billion into this, you get $2.7 billion back into the economy, and you create jobs. And, I have to say this, the Chinese, they get it, infrastructure creates the resources to pay for itself, and they've taken it to excess. Like if you're in China, you see that everywhere you go in China, I spent a lot of time in many Chinese provinces, and there's excess infrastructure in China now. They've taken it to the extremes, like they were 50. But now, what I'm trying to say, that is, if you look at Tanzania, you look at Ethiopia, the fastest growing economy over the last 20 years before the Civil War, even during the Civil War, they were doing quite well. And so what I'm trying to say is that if there's one thing that makes a difference, and I've cut and sliced the investment numbers, just like I've cut and sliced the jobs numbers, we have to get this public investment growing. Yeah.
Okay. So public sector, public investment definitely needs to grow.
Yeah. This is your schools, your hospitals, everything. Yeah.
The highways, potholes aren't good. Your water not running out of the taps is not a very good thing.
Uber drivers, they just complain about the roads all the time. And they said, if this government can just fix the roads. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what we've got, and now we're going to go at that other point. So let's agree that what we need great targeted government spending.
Yeah.
You've mentioned China, which has taken it to the extreme.
Yeah.
But not too many yuan are wasted through through corruption, right? Because there's generally a firing squad at the end of that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, let me give you just a joke. So now the guy, that after the global financial crisis, they're thinking, what shall we do? And they said, we're going to build this high-speed rail. And this thing, they spent about $300 billion, and they created, 30,000 kilometers of rail. I was on the one from Beijing to Shanghai. But now the head of the rail company, by the way, this rail company makes huge losses in billions of dollars every year. Huge corruption in China. They executed the guy. But the project goes on. Do you see what I'm saying? And they executed the people who were involved in the corruption. I'm not saying we must bring back the death penalty, but I'm just saying that you're correct. Yeah, right. We have to have huge consequences for corruption.
Now we're going to get to, I told everybody earlier to follow you on Twitter, and now what we see is you retweeting Aubrey Machiki's tweet that the government of national unity is the lowest point since 1652. The counter-revolution is truly on track. Apartheid demons are rolling with laughter on the floors of hell. Right. You're not a fan of the government of national unity.
Yes, because let's just say, so the ANC government, let me just start. Okay, so now the government, the ANC support went down from 65.9% in 2009 to 40.2%. So that is down by 25.7 percentage points. And it coincides with the economic collapse.
You're right.
So everything else is a symptom of this economic collapse, according to me. So as the ANC, I would assume that you solve it's the economy, stupid.
Yes.
If the economy was growing, do you think the people would have voted for Jacob Zuma? I phoned my sister who lives in KZN. She says,
sorry, we can prove it by their 2004 election result, where they got up to nearly 70% on the back of an economic.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So I was talking to my sister who lives in KZN. We grew up the second. So she says, the people who work for me, they all voted for Jacob Zuma. Now, I'm opposed to this demonization of everybody who voted for Jacob Zuma. The province of KwaZulu-Natal is falling apart, And
under the ANC.
Under the ANC and all these coalitions under the ANC. So what I'm trying to say... So,
no, there's no coalitions over... I mean,
no, sorry.
it fell apart under the ANC.
No, so what I'm... So I lost my track. I didn't answer the original question. Sorry, yeah. So you're saying... so I'm just saying that the ANC now would say, okay, now what went wrong in terms of this? We have to change the policies that we're doing over the past 15 years. We have to do what happened, during 2003, 2008 under Thabo Mbeki. We have to put more juice into the engine, and get this economy going. But what do? They double down on these failed policies. So now if you look at the DA's framework for a coalition, it is word for word, cut and paste from National Treasury's budget 2024 budget review. If you look at the target for GDP for the budget deficit, it's 3.5%. In the budget review, it is 3.3% by the end of the year. And then if you look at the DA, everything that is in that framework on the economy. So I'm saying it's not that I have a problem with the DA. I just have to mention something. In 2017, I think it was, I went to address a conference of the DA in George, Well, it's the municipalities, the Eden municipalities. I was shocked. I got such a positive response and all those 9 municipalities are DA municipalities. And I discovered that, you know what? I was really, really shocked. And I was telling my host, how is this possible? Many of the mayors were former ANC mayors who had gone to the DA. And I was convinced at the time that there is a social democratic wing of the DA. But I believe Helen and John have shut down that social democratic wing of the DA. So my point, what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of progressive people across all political parties, whether it's the DA, whatever. But now the DA of today that has gone further to the right, under John and Helen, and then you put the ANC with their failed policies, it'll just entrench these failed policies. So what I'm trying to say, the ANC is now at 40.2%. They don't get to choose their partners. They're the ones that created this mess. So probably what they should, so that's what I'm trying to say.
So what would you have had them
Now
do?
that I've thought about it, if I was the ANC, I was talking to a friend of mine, they would have run a minority government. And then they would have said, if we want to change these policies, you don't get to choose your partners. EFF and the other small parties would vote for me while we sort out the family feud with Jacob Zuma.
Let's go to this family feud,
right?
Because there's something that absolutely makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
You're a man that does a lot of analysis. In your life, have you ever seen a breakaway party rejoin the mothership? Have you ever, in any country, have you ever seen a breakaway party? Why are we so obsessed with this idea? Why can't we understand? I mean, do you see similar policies in the EFF to the ANC? Do you see similar policies?
No, the ANC policies don't work.
Okay, but hang on, I'm asking you. Do you see there's similar policies? No.
No, there's no policy.
Okay, so do you see similar policies
with the DA?
With the Kings, what's his name, MK? Right, where we're going to bring back African law and you're going to get fined 2 cows for speeding and we're going to do away with the Constitution. Right. What drives your thought that this is the same party that deserves to get back together again?
No. All I said is that they are where they are now, the ANC. If they've learned the real lesson, they will say our economic policy failed. So if our economy was growing throughout this period, the last 15 years, the people wouldn't have voted for the MK. The ANC would have retained most for MK and the EFF. They would have retained most of their support because it's the economy stupid. So that is the counterfactual that I'm putting forward. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that they would say now we're at 40.2. How are we going to create these jobs? We are not going to create the jobs by doubling down on these failed policies with the DA. So it's not like I've got a problem with the DA. It's just that I will go and speak to the DA and whatever. that we have to have, I believe that there are people in the DA who will agree with me, because when I was in the conference and all those before the pandemic, many people actually agreed with me. But what I'm trying to say is that, there is no way out of this crisis except to look at the economy, stupid. And all this thing about cabinet positions, it's got nothing to do with the crisis of jobs.
You know, Duma, I've sort of said this before, and I'll say it again, and that is that a state exists in two forms. At war and at peace.
Yeah, we're at war now.
We're not really. I'm talking about
we're
war.
At war against unemployment.
Wait. Just first go with me. I'm talking about war like people are lobbing bombs at us. Okay. And then your Ukraine, your Gaza, whatever it is, bombs are raining on your head. It takes a certain kind of leadership. Outside of war, a state exists purely to serve the economy.
Yeah, 100%. Right? Yeah.
So now, to me, the thing that was unnatural in South Africa is this broad church idea. Makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I'm just a little bit too set in my ways, but I do not understand how that can be in the best interest of the country. In other words, it makes perfectly good sense to me that the EFF goes off and forms the EFF. And says, we want to turn this into little Venezuela. Get it. Go for it. Perfect. I can perfectly understand Jacob Zuma saying, let's start Mkhonto Wesizwe, let's turn this back into 1863. That's fine. He can be there. A pastoralist, post-truth populist demagogue. That's fine. Vote for that if you like. But why they should be under one tent, I don't understand.
No. I'm saying that if they would have been under one tent, if the economy had been growing,
would that be a good thing, though? Because the last time they were under one tent, the economy was growing, and they split it up. They the ones that blew up the tent.
No, what I'm trying to say...
Those very people are the ones that blew up the tent.
Okay, so I don't like going into the politics of everything.
I'm not. But I'm saying you've got to set the ground rules here, because let's understand, because by your very facts and figures, South Africa is going along quite nicely. Who was it that derailed it? It was Julius Malema in the youth wing, EFF. It was Jacob Zuma as the presumptive president, MK. Right? So I'm saying they are best out of this conversation. You know what I mean? I'm saying I've got the facts to prove it.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Mike, we have to bring all South Africans, to a common vision and plan for the economy.
I disagree. I'll tell you why I disagree with that.
No, but
I'll tell you.
Are you going to demonize 2.3 million voters of MK and you're not going to provide them with public service? This is absolute nonsense.
Sir, let me explain to you what I mean by that, right? And that is, what I'm saying is that let's take popular examples, right? Margaret Thatcher, whatever one thinks of her policies, absolutely put her economy on turbocharge. Right? And nearly half of the population despised her, and they were completely outside of the tent as they grew richer. What I'm saying is these successful policies.
No, right? Margaret Thatcher was not successful.
But from an economic perspective, let's use a different example.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that there's almost by definition,
14 years of Tory rule now.
Yes,
they're going to be kicked out. It was a complete disaster.
Absolutely. But that's a different, exactly right. What I'm saying is that when they get in there, then, when you create policies for good or for bad, there are people that hate them.
Okay, let me tell you, Mike. I will talk to all South Africans.
Yes.
I talk to people from all political parties. I'm not factionalist. People listen to me because they perceive me not to be a factionalist. I'll talk to the EFF. Right. I talk to the MK. I talk to ANC. I talk to DA. Rise Mzansi.
Yes.
Yeah. I talk to them as well.
Can you explain to me from your perspective, because you are an economist and you speak to everybody and you've got a far more open mind than most of your peers. Where do you sit on some of these real sort of bedrocks, as I see them, certainly as they framed, in an economic sense? So the Constitution, do you see that as being an important issue for a successful economy, or not necessarily?
I was listening to a show on Sizwe's Mpofu Wolf's SMWX, and I must confess, first of all, I don't think the constitution is cast in stone. We must never
No,
change it.
but it's there to change.
It's there to change.
But rule of law. Listen, I lived under parliamentary law, which is what's being.
But
it was horrendous.
But the point is, I can guarantee that. So what came out of that show that I think Pierre de Vos was saying, like, it's fine to criticize the constitution, but he would like to hear a little bit more about what MK want to replace it with. You see what I'm saying? So we shouldn't. So I know that if we're all under a room, there's this national dialogue that's coming. If we're all under a room as South Africans, we will agree on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we have to get.
I disagree with you, because if we were going to agree on 1, 2, if we needed 100% buy-in,
we don't have to agree on everything. But
so I would say 75% is a pretty decent.
The one thing that I think we have to agree on, number one, is like this GDP growth target that I am believing that.
And we need to agree that our problem, our war, which I think now we're going to go back to, is a war.
Back to the war of unemployment. So I have never come across a country in peacetime that does as badly as we have.
Yes,
in 1.2%. If you look at, I was looking at the numbers in Ukraine on energy and South Africa ESCOM. We were doing worse than Ukraine in terms of energy, and also the crime problem that we have. It is just shocking. It is worse than Ukraine. Last time I looked at the statistics.
Duma, you know, one could take that a step further and say that you've got so many millions of people in poverty, right? As a capitalist, you should lick your lips, because those people are buyers of your products. They need to buy a house. They need to buy a TV set. They need to go up the chain. You've got a ready market. The biggest problem facing so many of the developed economies in the world is they've got no buyers for their products.
Potential buyers.
But I'm saying there's a market.
Yes,
right?
100%. So as I was talking before we get in, I went to Soweto on Thursday to a youth entrepreneurship workshop by Tami Mazwai. And I was thinking, like, I don't know, this will get me into trouble. You know, like, I was in China and there was this town where Xi was the mayor. They decided to just raise the whole thing. So what I'm trying to say to you is that the unmet needs of our people don't understand how huge they are. The unmet needs of the people. What do the people want? And, the people want houses. They want, what does go in the house? People want jobs, they want houses, they want cars, they want freezers.
Yes.
Just think of that, what you're saying, all those people who don't have those things.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So let's provide them to the people. And
And there's one other massive thing in our favor. The fact that people have always said, the revolution. And we've seen that our people have no stomach for a revolution. They have not stomach is the wrong word. No desire for a revolution.
Do you know what?
These are people that want to work.
Yeah,
they're entrepreneurial.
Most South Africans are not interested in the bickering in parliament and the bickering over cabinet posts. They just want to see opportunities, to send and I disagree that South Africans are materialistic. Most people are not materialistic. Most people just want the basics for their families and proper schools, proper hospitals that work, and things, the basics. And I don't understand. And proper police force, and that will provide security. And I don't understand why the government can't just focus on the things that they're supposed to do. That people, my favorite statistic is that the Department of Health hasn't given me the latest ones. 20,000 doctors for 85% of the population. How can that be right? If you benchmark us against the OECD, I was with a friend of mine, Dr. Shongwe, and he says, no, I don't agree with your benchmark. But I say, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we need to have 150,000 doctors to reach OECD numbers, and nurses, we need to have 300,000 nurses to reach OECD, another 300,000 nurses. So this is people don't understand the scale of the challenges that we're faced as a country. Yeah.
And Duma, there's another thing that we don't bicker about. We don't bicker about the best car rental business is Pace Car Rental.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
So there we go. We've done our duty. Duma Gqubule, it has been an absolute joy to speak to you. I hope we do this again because we've got a few more problems to solve. To everybody that's joined us here on the State of the Nation, I hope you've subscribed, like this, put your comments down below. I respond to most of them. Duma, once again, it's been a joy to have you here. To everybody that's joined us today on the State of the Nation, thank you. We'll see you again on the State of the Nation.